Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Satire Fire podcast, where my world is on fire. How about yours? I don't really like it, but at least I'm never bored. I am your host, Samuel.
And I'm Sydney.
And this is the podcast where we talk about all things satire. Specifically, we typically talk about books that are satirical, but who knows? We might throw in a satirical movie every now and then or something like that. This is our first actual long-form series that we're doing about a satirical book. Yeah, hooray! And the book that we've chosen to do, as you've probably noticed from the title, is 1984 by George Orwell. The way that this is going to work and the way that all of our series work, this first episode is just going to be a plot summary of the book. We're not really going to get into analysis too much. We're not going to talk too much about our feelings and impressions on the book. It's just going to be giving you enough information about the plot of the book that all the rest of the episodes make sense. So, if you have already read the book, you are more than welcome to skip this one and go straight into our analysis episodes, although this is going to be a fun episode. All of them are going to be equally fun. But this is really just
such a fun book, so we're really excited. It's so much fun.
Exactly. This is really intended as a way for us to go into the rest of the episodes with the assumption that everybody is familiar with the book. We didn't want to just do episodes assuming that everybody had read a book that is, 80 years old. So giving everybody the opportunity to have that plot summary is really the intention of it. So if you're going to skip an episode, this is the one to skip, but don't skip it because it's going to be fun.
It's really fun. Listen to us talk, please. I love the sound of my own voice, so...
Speaking of talking the sounds of our own voice, how are you doing, Sydney? Have you read anything fun lately outside of 1984?
Yeah, I've been reading Empire of Pain, it's a nonfiction book about the Sackler family. If you don't, for both our listeners and you, Samuel, I don't know. If you don't know about the Sackler family, they are the family who eventually owned Purdue Pharma and are, credited with the creation and marketing of OxyContin. And so it's kind of about their rise to influence and how they got all their billions of dollars, and then their downfall when everyone was like, hey, you've done a lot of problematic things and now lots of people have died. And it's been really interesting. It's a super riveting book. It kind of reads almost like a fiction book because of how fast-paced it can be. And I think the author, Patrick Radden Keefe, who has written lots of other well-known books, does a great job of at times making you feel empathy and understanding for the Sacklers, and then the next page you turn it and you're pissed and you're like, what is wrong with them? Like, why would they do such an unethical thing? So that's been really fun. And I've also been listening to the audiobook of The Great Gatsby just because I felt like rereading it. And so, yeah.
It's been a while for me with that one. Like, I feel like I feel like The Great Gatsby fits into the same category as 1984 for a lot of people, where it's a book that you read in high school and everybody is familiar with, at the very least tangentially. But I don't know if I know that many people that have revisited it as an adult, unless it's like your favorite book. Like, I feel like I know a couple of people who The Great Gatsby is their favorite book, and so they've reread it a couple of times. But yeah, I haven't looked at it since high school.
It is one of my favorites. I have reread it once since high school. I never had to read it for a class, though. I just read it by choice in high school and then read it again in college, but early college. I do love it. I mean, we're not here to talk about The Great Gatsby, but I can see why someone would both love it and both not like it, but it is one of my favorites, and I definitely think it made an impact on me early on, like in terms of classics I was reading. I was like, wow, this is beautiful, and also it really fed into my lust for living in New York City someday, and here I am. So
Damn. So this could potentially be the most impactful book that we have talked about thus far, as it is the only book that has directly fed into one of us living in the place that we live.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, what have you been reading?
I've been reading a lot. I'm on a mission to try and read as many books as I can this year. So far, I have read 9 books, which is not a lot compared to some people. I understand that. But I also have plenty of people in my life who've not read 9 books in the past 3 years. So it's a lot for me. One that I wanted to talk about is going to be the most recent book that I gave 5 stars to, which is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure there's lots of Sally Rooney fans out here who will be excited about this.
I am interested to read more of Sally Rooney. This was my first foray into any of her books. I've got another one on hold at my library so that I can read it hopefully soon. But for those who aren't familiar with Intermezzo,
Sorry.
yeah.
Okay.
For those who are not familiar with Intermezzo, it's basically looking at the relationship between 2 brothers and the relationships that those 2 brothers have with the other people in their lives. So you've got each brother the brothers are maintaining a familial relationship with one another while being at odds with each other, while each brother has at least one romantic interest in their life that they are trying to maintain. And all of the action in the book is taking place in the backdrop of their father having recently passed away. And so it's really an interesting look at the ways in which different people deal with grief and how different people deal with loss. And then it also just has a lot of interesting things to say about love and relationships and what constitutes a healthy relationship and what constitutes a toxic relationship. But more than I liked the plot, I liked all the stuff that was going on. The thing that I mainly enjoyed is how well she creates and defines her characters, where every character feels incredibly believable to me, but also part of the reason why they feel so believable is because nobody is really a good person and nobody's really a bad person. Everybody is just a person, and they're making mistakes and they're doing the right thing, and they're making mistakes and they're just kind of doing the best that they can. There's some people who are generally better than others and some people who are generally worse than others, but I just really enjoy reading a book that allows its characters to be less than perfect and greater than despicable.
Yeah, I feel like we both read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow last year, and that's similar in some ways. But the characters are complex, and you hate them, you love them, you can't really make full judgments on them, and they're
definitely. And
so I think that's definitely a nice thing in a character-driven novel. Yeah.
But with all of that out of the way, I think we should get into the meat of this episode, which is going to just be, like I said at the start, a plot summary for 1984. I'm going to do my darndest to keep this as succinct as I can while still giving enough information. I've not actually read this summary out loud yet, and so I don't know how long it is, but I'm going to try to bounce around and make sure that I don't miss anything important, while also keeping this episode to a reasonable length. So if I cover the first half of this book in way more detail than the second half, it's because we were running out of time and I needed to speed up.
I thought you were going to be like, I've not actually read the book, but that's funny.
This is maybe the book that I've read the most amount of times at this point. Like, I've read this book probably 4 times, which I know is not like a tremendous amount for somebody to reread a book, but I just don't typically reread books. But let's start. We'll start with book 1, because the book is broken up into 3 books. But it's a cold day in April. The clocks are striking 13, and a 39-year-old man named Winston Smith is coming home to an apartment called Victory Mansions, where the elevator is always out of service and the halls smell like cabbage. On every landing of the stairs is a poster with an enormous face and the words, "Big Brother is watching you."
Big Brother.
This is how we're setting our scene. So every piece of fiction, because it's a piece of fiction, is going to have to create a fictional world, and it is then going to be asking you to believe something. Like a superhero movie is going to ask you to believe in the powers of the superhero. A action movie is going to ask you to believe in the stakes of the action. So something that I wanted to focus on is, what does 1984 want you to believe right out the gate? Because that's some of the stuff that is going to be the most important, and it's going to come up thematically throughout the rest of the book. So what's 1984 asking us to believe? It is asking you to believe that surveillance in this world is constant, that there are obvious linguistic contradictions that are going unquestioned in a lot of ways, that the government has ultimate authority. Those are like the 3 things that I noted as like, these are things that this world wants us to believe. Was there anything that you picked up on, Sydney?
I think that a big thing that is, well, I think you might touch on this in a second, but also just thinking that there's a sense of uneasiness about everything that you do. And so they want you to believe that no one is comfortable.
Yeah,
Truly.
That's something that I wrote down in my notes, was the fact that the world is basically set up as one massive panopticon where everybody feels as though they have the potential of being watched at any moment. Like, nobody feels safe from observation. So some of those linguistic contradictions that get brought up really early that I was going to touch on were the names of the different government ministries, which are just like government agencies. But this is vaguely set in a dystopian England. And so they're called ministries because that's what they're called in England.
Yeah.
But
and it's specifically in London, but also it's not London as we know it at all, definitely. So
yeah. The London, Ministry of Peace is their war department. The Ministry of Love is the ministry that is basically tasked with disappearing people. Like, they're keeping the peace by running the police department and the thought police, which we'll touch on more later, and stuff like that. The Ministry of Plenty is in charge of rationing all of the supplies that they have. And then the final ministry, which is the one that Winston works for as a low official, is the Ministry of Truth, which is concerned with, quote, news, entertainment, education, and the fine arts. What that ends up translating into is basically they use these big printing presses and machines to churn out all kinds of fiction books for the mass population of the land, while other people, such as Winston, are working as the inverse of a historical fact checker, where basically in this world, the ruling party is never allowed to be wrong.
Yeah. In a way, I kind of view Winston as a reporter, but he's definitely not a reporter. It's an anti-reporter. He's...
Yeah.
he writes. That's what he does every day. But really, he's rewriting history.
Yeah, which I think that he gets into his job a little bit more in like the second chapter, so we'll touch on it that. But yeah, basically all you need to know is that all of the ministries have a name, and the name is almost exactly counter to what they actually do. So back to what is actually happening in chapter 1, we find out that Winston has a small diary that he's been hiding in his home, where he has started to do writings of his thoughts and things along those lines. And in this scene, he's using his diary to write down some of the things that has happened in his past couple of days, like going to a movie and stuff like that. But while he is writing, he begins thinking back to an experience that he had at work during what was called the 2 minutes of hate, where the party has a specific counter-revolutionary that exists that they are directing all of their anti-party sympathies and sentiments towards. So during the 2 minutes of hate, they basically show a picture of this guy called Emmanuel Goldstein on the screen, and everybody just yells at him and calls him a traitor and shit like that.
Yeah.
Well, during the last 2 minutes of hate, he locked eyes with a inner party member, like a upper... do you know what exactly his job title is? Because I don't have that written down and I didn't remember.
I'm around that page in the book, so I can see if it says, you keep going, and then if I find it.
But basically, the important part is that he's a higher up official. He locks eyes with this official and thinks to himself how he hates Big Brother, and he believes that he recognizes that same sentiment in the eyes of the other official. And so he feels like a sense of camaraderie.
Yeah. Okay, so O'Brien, interjection, is member of the inner party, like we've said, and I quote, holder of some post so important and remote that Winston only had a dim idea of its nature. So
okay,
like,
so the reason why I have a dim idea is because, yeah.
That we don't even know what he does. It's top secret.
Cool. And then he also thinks about this dark-haired girl who works in the fiction department, who he thinks is beautiful, but also thinks might be a spy for the secret police. And he's had fantasies of having sex with this girl, and he's had fantasies of killing this girl because he thinks that she's part of the secret police. And while he's going through all this, like, thought process, he's writing down in his journal, and he realizes that he's just been writing down a series of Down with Big Brother, which is Big Brother is the figurehead of the ruling party, so he's basically just saying, like, down with the king, which is a criminal act. And so now he has officially created a record of himself as a criminal, and he has the realization that at some point he is going to get unpersoned because he's going against the party. And that basically is the setting for the rest of the book. Did you have anything from like the first chapter that you wanted to talk about, Sydney?
Yeah, I think it was a good... One thing I wanted to point out that I think we didn't mention is that, and I think we're going to get into this more, but you know, the secret police, the thought police, who are kind of there to intervene when someone commits a crime, you know, against the party. They think or they say or they take an action against the party. They create this sense of mistrust between people. Like everyone you meet, they could be aligned with you in their thoughts, or they could be aligned with the party. And I think that contributes to just like from the jump, like we're feeling this uneasiness of like, who can we trust, or can we trust anyone? Can we trust Winston? Like, I don't know, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing I feel when I first start reading the book.
Yeah, and I think that gets emphasized in the next chapter, which I'm basically going to skip over because it's not like super plot relevant, but you see that the next door neighbors' children are part of an organization called the Junior Spies, which is very analogous to like the Hitler Youth, where kids participate in this program and then through the participation in the program get indoctrinated into party messaging. And so a lot of people who get turned into the secret police, the thought police as they're called, or other government bodies, are actually turned in by their own kids, because their kids are like rabid believers and go to school and say, hey, my parents were doing this thing that is against the party order. So it's like so wide reaching that you can't even trust your own family.
Yeah. Another thing that like we didn't really mention, I think, is that it also sets the scene in the first chapter of, you know, lack of resources. And so we, you know, Winston has very little food, and if anything, like good tasting food, which is true for everyone, even except for probably those in the inner party, but we aren't in the inner party. We're not seeing it from their point of view, but the food is bad. There's not a lot of it. Ministry of Plenty is supposed to make sure there's a lot of it, but there's really not. So
the next like important thing that happens is Winston starts thinking about his own memories of the past, because it hasn't really gotten into it yet, but we will in just a little bit. The fact that memory and the history is incredibly important and incredibly regulated. Like the one thing that we have talked about that we kind of skipped over that I think is important to touch on is that the 3 party slogans for the ruling party are war is peace, freedom is slavery, and ignorance is strength, which really plays into the way that they're trying to control memory and information. But Winston starts thinking about his own memory, thinking about the fact that he has a really tough time remembering any part of his childhood, anything about his mother and stuff like that. And also the history of the world that he lives in as a whole, where the country that he lives in is called Oceania, which essentially is all of the British Empire and also America. And for all of history, Oceania has been at war with Eurasia, which Eurasia is Russia plus all of Europe. And Oceania has been in alliance with Eastasia, which is the rest of the world, which I will say is a crazy split. Like, that's such a wild division of America and the British colonies, Russia and Europe, and then everything else is East Asia. That's busted. He's remembering the fact that up until like 1960, which based off of the title of the book, hopefully you know that the book is set in or around 1984, but up until 1960, nobody had heard of this party leader, Big Brother. He just suddenly kind of came out of nowhere, and has been a presence ever since, and has been alluded to as though he's always been there.
There's something I, bracketed or I annotated in the first few pages of the book, that he's trying to remember. He's walking through London to go to the Victory Mansions where he lives, and through London, quote unquote. And it says, I won't read the whole thing, but he tried to squeeze out some childhood memory that should tell him whether London had always been quite like this, where there are always these vistas of rotting 19th century houses, their sides shored up with balks of timber, their windows patched with cardboard, and their roofs with corrugated, is that how you pronounce that word?
Yeah,
iron.
corrugated.
Their crazy garden walls sagging in all directions. And then it goes on to talk about the bomb sites and the rubble and just, this war-torn city. And he says, but it's no use. He cannot remember. Nothing remained of his childhood, except a series of bright lit tableaux occurring against no background and mostly unintelligible. And yeah, this continues to be a theme of like Winston trying really hard to remember the past.
Yeah, exactly.
Really struggling.
The next section, so the book's already touched a lot on surveillance. It's touched a lot on like government power over the people. I think that this next section is one of my favorites, where it starts talking about the way in which the government is controlling the press a lot, because you get into Winston's job at the Ministry of Truth, where essentially what happens is every day Winston goes in and sits at a desk, and he gets a series of orders that are corrections, where at some point in the past, the party leader or a member of the inner party has said something, and that has proven to be untrue. And so he then has to go back into the records and change what they said so that now it looks like they were correct in the prediction that they made, or change the facts that were reported in the past so that what they said is now true. So this is can be as simple as when rations are put in place that makes everybody live with less food than they had before. Winston goes in and changes the previous numbers, so now it looks like even though food has been reduced, it's actually getting increased. And that goes as broad as completely disappearing people, where if somebody has been been found to be an enemy of the party, every record of that person is scrubbed, and entire articles are rewritten. So one of the things that we see is a specific person who got commended by Big Brother himself has now been found to be a party traitor, and so Winston has to go into the article where Big Brother was commending this person and just invent an entirely new person for Big Brother to have been talking about.
And those people, I think we've already said this word, but they become an unperson. So that is the word that is used in their language. I don't know if we're going to talk about that, right? So
talk about language?
The newspeak language specifically.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we saved that for later. But the language that they are trying to use in the party and in the world is newspeak, and they have the word unperson for someone who they never existed. They didn't exist. They don't exist. They're not a person. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Wow. Because the lie that Winston writes becomes the truth for the future.
And yeah, it also touches on the fact that the party is producing all of the stuff that we haven't talked about it that much yet, but basically the classes within the society are, you've got Big Brother himself, and then the people that are closest to Big Brother and the most important in the government are part of the inner party or the inner circle. And then you have outer party members, which you're still a government worker, but you don't have the same privileges as the inner party. And then everybody else are just called proles, which is short for proletariat. And the proletariat are basically just at the whims of the ruling class. They have no say in what's going on. They have no influence in a political sense. They're just kind of there for the ride. And you find out that the government is producing everything for the proletariat. Like no member of the proletariat is an author. No member of the proletariat is a painter or a musician. Everything is just made by machines and then sent out as a way to like pacify everybody. Mm-hmm. The next section is all about the, or not all about, but it starts talking about that newspeak, which we just talked about, which is essentially them trying to create a new official religion or language for the area, which this is going to come up a lot in our themes episode. So this is an important thing to know about. But essentially, newspeak is a method by which the government is reducing the amount of words in a language, the language being English, in an effort to contain the ability for people to think for themselves. The idea being you can't know that being a slave is bad if you don't understand the concept of freedom. Like if you can't form the thought of everybody is equal in the eyes of our maker or whatever, then you can't look at inequality and think that that's bad. Mm-hmm. I think that that's the important part there. We'll talk more, like I said, we'll talk more about Newspeak in a later episode. But I feel like that's enough. That's enough to understand it. Next, it talks about the ways in which people are controlled sexually, where people are not allowed to, if you're part of the member of the outer party, you're not allowed to have sex.
Wait, were you going to talk about Parsons?
Not really. If you wanted to talk about him, then this would probably be a good point, because I skipped him the first time.
Well, I just think Parsons represents the type of person that the party, the inner party, and Big Brother and their entire government system preys off of as an attempt, and is attempting to kind of, I mean, it's like eugenics in a way. Like, they want a class of people that are all like Parsons, who is simply just, unintelligent and is fully buying into the party's ideals. And he's Winston's neighbor, but he also works at the Ministry of Truth. And yeah, he comes up to Winston at a lunch table and they start talking. And there was like a part where it mentions that Parsons swallows the propaganda of the party easily, with the stupidity of an animal, fanatically, passionately, with the desire to track down and denounce anyone who could suggest other than what the party is saying. And I guess, dictators thrive off of the uneducated individual, and Parsons is a perfect example of that. So
yeah, I think that that's well said. I think that he'll definitely come up later, so it's good to point him up now. In the next section, we're still talking more about the manipulation of the past. Winston is looking through a children's book about history and realizing that he has no way of actually seeing if any of this is true, where the party is claiming to have taken over from capitalists who were these horrible, horrible people, and they've spread the wealth and everybody's in a better living condition now. Basically the claims are that the infant mortality rate is down, the literacy rates are up, everybody has better food and shelter. But Winston is calling all this into question because there was a period in the past where the inner party was dramatically reduced, where used to there were more leaders than just Big Brother, but there was this huge culling where everybody except for Big Brother was found to be a traitor to the party, and were put up on trial and found guilty and excommunicated, essentially. Well, in his process of fixing records, at some point, Winston actually came across an original, photograph that showed all of those party members in New York on the day that they were supposed to have been in Eurasia conspiring to overthrow Oceania. So he had physical proof in his hand that the party was lying. And ended up destroying it. And so now he just has that in his mind as a thing that he can always call back to, of the party does in fact lie. And he has concrete evidence as a memory that proves it. Mm-hmm. It also comes up later, but he talks about, to himself, the fact that true freedom lies in the ability to interpret reality as one perceives it. And therefore, as long as you can say that 2 + 2 = 4, you are truly free in your mind. The next section, he's going around town and talking to this old guy to see if the old man has memories, a proletariat guy has memories of what life was actually like before the party took over, to see if anything that the party has said about the past is true. Old guy doesn't remember anything. He ends up walking around some more, and he finds this room above an old antique store that is totally secluded. It doesn't have one of the monitoring telescreens on the wall. It's got a big photo of a local church, and he realizes that this could be like one of the few places in the city where somebody could hang out and be unmonitored, which comes up again later.
I think it's important to note that room is above the store in which he bought the diary in the first place. So his first act of, thought crime was buying this diary and writing in it. And now he's in this room, which is, in the same place.
Yeah. That's the end of book one. I think book one is the most dense portion of the book because it's really, really setting up the world and the ideas that are going to be prevalent throughout the rest of it. Then book two is about interacting with that world.
Did you, I didn't hear everything you said because it cut out at times, but did you mention that like throughout book one, he keeps seeing this dark-haired girl?
Oh no, I mentioned her once during the I mentioned her during when he remembers her at the beginning when he's writing the diary, but I haven't talked about seeing her again.
Yeah, he does. It just, generally speaking, he sees her. She keeps coming up. He sees her staring at him. He sees her at the very end of book one when he right after he walks out of that antique shop. And so he's like, oh my God, this girl is going to get me killed. Like, she's an agent of the secret police. So. Yeah.
And he actually, like, at this point fantasizes about maybe he should just follow her and bash her head in with a paving stone so that she doesn't report him.
Yeah.
Then book two starts with him walking through the halls of the Ministry of Truth and seeing that same dark-haired girl with her arm in a sling. She trips and falls in the hallway, and then when he helps her get up, she passes him a note that just says, "I love you." That sparks in him the desire to continue living, and they, after a couple of days, finally manage to meet in the lunchroom and start planning another time that they can meet that's not at work. That leads to them going out into the countryside where the girl says she's been before, and there's not any way that the party can observe them. They start talking, and then they end up, she asks him if, I can't remember the exact wording of it, but basically she asks him if he has thought about her before, or if so, in what way. And he confesses to having had fantasies about having sex with her, but also through the fear that she might be a secret police officer, has fantasized about killing her at times. And then after that, they bang.
I have a lot of thoughts about sex throughout this book, but I think I'm going to save those for later episodes. But I want everyone to keep sex on the mind.
Okay, pervert. No, yeah, I agree. I think that sex is very important because it then goes on to talk about the fact that Winston is technically married, that he and his wife are separated, but there's not really like a good system to getting a divorce in the society, and he and his wife separated because of sexual reasons, where the wife hated the act of sex, couldn't stand it, and then they ended up finding out that they were not able to have kids together, and as soon as she found that out, she basically left and has never returned. Mm-hmm. Winston, and at this point we should know the girl's name is Julia, if we haven't said that yet.
Winston and Julia against the world.
Okay. Winston and Julia have been finding time to try and meet. They're both frustrated with the fact that they can't meet more often, and Winston ends up renting that room above the antique shop as a place for them to have their own like secluded area, and they start semi-regularly meeting there. And when they're meeting there, Julia starts bringing in all these like contraband items that she's managed to get access to, so stuff like sugar and coffee and makeup and stuff like that. And so they are continually pushing the line of getting caught by doing increasingly bold acts of sedition, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And she starts dressing to reflect this individuality in a way, only when she's in that room. You know, she wears makeup, she puts on a dress, things like that.
Yeah. They then have a bit of like a disagreement with one another where Winston feels that Julia's acts of rebellion against the party are purely self-motivated and are not like reflective enough. Like like Winston believes that he's rebelling against the party because he believes that the party is corrupt, and he believes that Julia is only rebelling because doing so allows her to have physical pleasure. So she doesn't have sex because it is against the rules. She has sex because sex is fun. She doesn't take these contraband items because doing so is a one-up on the party. She does it because the contraband items are luxury items that are nice to have. He at this point accuses her of being a rebel only from the waist down, which is a wild statement to make. Then O'Brien makes contact with Winston and basically invites him to his house, and Winston brings Julia, and the two of them go to see O'Brien because at this point Winston still believes that O'Brien is a compatriot, that he is, while being a member of the inner party, also against Big Brother, and has had a dream in which O'Brien tells him that the two of them are going to meet in the future in the place where there is no darkness. And Winston kind of holds on to a lot of his dreams, but specifically this one as semi-prophetic. And so he agrees to go and see O'Brien because he thinks that it's going to be a like meeting of the minds, and they're going to like plan together to overthrow the party or whatever. He, at this point, has fully accepted that he is on a path that is going to lead to him someday being killed. But it's a path that he wants to take.
It's about to get crazy.
Winston and Julia spend another night together. Winston wakes up crying, talking about the memories that he has of his mother and the lack of memories that he has in certain areas. And they commiserate over the fact that they know they're someday going to get captured, and if they get captured, they're going to get tortured and potentially killed. And they basically say that no matter what the party does, they can make them confess their crimes, but they can't make them not love each other anymore. And they agree that the best thing for both of them would just to be leave the room and leave each other forever, but they can't do that. This is the point where they go to O'Brien's house. O'Brien turns off his telescreens, which is a thing that shocks everybody because they didn't know that was a thing that you were allowed to do. So essentially, they're allegedly not being monitored at this point, and they start talking about Emmanuel Goldstein and whether or not he exists and whether or not the Brotherhood exists. And O'Brien says, yeah, Emmanuel Goldstein has this manifesto that you should read that goes against the party, and says that he's going to get that manifesto to Winston so that he can educate himself on the resistance, essentially. Then one of the most important examples of the power of controlling all information comes to pass, where it's the middle of Hate Week, which the 5 minutes of hate is specifically directed at Emmanuel Goldstein. Hate Week is when you're supposed to hate Emmanuel Goldstein and the Brotherhood and all of the anti-party rebels, as well as all of the enemies that Oceania is currently at war with, which is Eurasia. But in the middle of Hate Week, in the middle of somebody giving a speech, a note is passed around, and the speaker instead clarifies that Oceania is not and has never been at war with Eurasia, and is in fact at war and has always been at war with East Asia. And so everybody's working overtime to try and change all of these records from the past who knows how long, where the references are being made to who they are or are not at war with. It says that Winston ends up working a 90-hour week trying to keep everything together. A lot of protesters start accusing Emmanuel Goldstein's agents and the Brotherhood of sabotaging them because they're walking around now with anti-Eurasia signs. They're like, there's no way that I brought a sign against Eurasia because obviously we've always been at war with East Asia. But finally, they get a chance to get away from everything. They go back to the room above the antique store. And this is maybe the portion of the book that people that I've seen who dislike the book dislike the most, that I think is the most important section of the book, which is where Winston begins reading from Emmanuel Goldstein's manifesto to Julia, where it's a relatively long book. It's broken up into chapters based off of the different party slogans, and essentially talks about the theory of social classes over time and the history of what made the world, and gets into details about the ways in which the party slogans actually make sense. So I'm not going to go through all of it, but essentially the concept of war is peace is through the fact that if you are constantly at war with another nation, you're able to maintain peace at home because people develop such a rabid nationalism during a wartime effort that you're able to maintain homeland peace by always putting on a war on the fringes of society.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting because this whole section, it feels like George Orwell kind of just wrote a sociology textbook a little bit. Like it's really, I've never read a book that did something like this, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. The next chapter, they wake up after having read some of the book, and they've been caught. It turns out that painting of the church on the wall actually had a telescreen behind them, and Mr. What is it? Sharrington? Mr.
Sharrington, yeah.
Mr. Sharrington has the whole time been an agent of the Thought Police, and they are both arrested and carried away. And that's the end of book 2.
You skipped one of my favorite quotes.
Oh, what is it?
Sanity is not statistical.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways,
I had that written down, but yeah, I did skip it.
Yeah. For our listeners, it's just something that Winston thinks. It's one of his last thoughts before being captured.
Yes. That's the end of book 2. Book 2 is about the development and flourishing of Winston and Julia's relationship, and then book 3 is about breaking it. Because Winston is now imprisoned inside of what he believes has got to be the Ministry of Peace. They were like knocked unconscious. He wakes up in a room with no windows and no way of knowing what time it is. And yeah, he's basically just in prison. And you start to see a rotating cast of people from the rest of the book come through these waiting cells with him, where you see that people that he thought were too smart for their own good come through because they have been called out for being anti-party. And you also end up seeing Parsons come through because his own kids have called him out for being a seditionist. Eventually, he's led to a private cell, and in steps O'Brien. And at first, Winston thinks that O'Brien has also been captured because he's anti-party. And then you quickly realize that no, he's actually there to torture Winston because he has been betraying Winston the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Shocking. That's very shocking.
Yeah. It starts getting, this portion is very straightforward plot-wise, but very dense thematically, where it's just Winston getting tortured and O'Brien trying to change the way that he views the world and change his mindset about various things. And during the process, O'Brien is talking about the theories behind why the party does what it does. It talks about how this system of unpersoning someone prevents people from becoming martyrs, where essentially if you just kill people who are opposing you, then they become martyrs and are a rallying cry for other people. If you just disappear them, then they're not allowed to become a martyr, and you're able to prevent that inflection point of a revolution, essentially. Mm-hmm. One of the sections that I really like is O'Brien tells him that he's been doing well enough in the, essentially, conversion therapy, that he's allowed to ask some questions and O'Brien will answer them. And he asks if Julia's okay, and O'Brien says that Julia betrayed him immediately when she started getting tortured. He asks if Big Brother exists, and O'Brien says that yes, in a sense, Big Brother is a real person and exists. And Winston says, well, does he exist in the same way that I do? And O'Brien says, you don't exist. So at this point, he is threatened with being taken into this mysterious room 101 where nobody really returns from, and it's like the ultimate point of being tortured. Did you have anything about this part that you wanted to add? Because I feel like I'm about to skip a lot of stuff that is not.
It's a very, like you said, it's like really complex what is going on, and I feel like it's a bit hazy in terms of, because it's like they're delving into these deep thought principles of the party throughout all these sessions. And I think it's a key section for understanding like the entire purpose of this world and the party, because Winston is asking these questions, O'Brien is responding in like answers that mean multiple things at once. The way I'm even phrasing this sounds really confusing, but I guess just to someone who hasn't read this or hasn't read it in a while, it's important to note that like O'Brien is, I don't know the way to phrase it, like he is slowly and painfully conditioning Winston into, I guess, what we don't know yet, but
yeah,
it's, I don't know if we need to go through the little details because I feel like those might be better for thematic discussions, but I don't really know how to
yeah, he's definitely like, he's slowly whittling away and making him say these things and then saying, yeah, you're saying that because you're afraid, you're not saying it because you believe it, I'm going to make you believe it. And this is where you get into the 2 + 2 = 5 discussion that's incredibly popular. He also writes down on this slate that they give him that freedom is slavery, and he also writes down God is power. And these are like the last things that he writes before he's like fully broken. And go ahead.
Oh, I think it makes a comparison in the book, right, to like the way that the Soviets and the Nazis, and like, doesn't it say that?
Yeah. Whenever it's talking about the like making, refusing to allow people to become martyrs, it says that they've essentially refined the ideas that were presented by the Nazis and the Soviets.
Yeah, crazy.
Then Winston ends up getting taken into room 101. He has this cage strapped to his chest with a wall on one side of it, and is told that the worst thing imaginable on the other side is on the other side of the wall, and that if he doesn't comply, the wall is going to get taken out. And it's implied that it's rats on the other side, that if he doesn't do what they want, they'll take away the wall and rats are going to eat through his chest, which is the thing that he's most afraid of.
Yeah.
he, at the last second, just before the wall is taken out, starts screaming out that they should do it to Julia instead. That he doesn't want it done to him. He can't have it done to him. He can't handle it. They take Julia and do it to her. And this is like the moment of him being broken, is when he's faced with the worst imaginable thing, he would rather it happen to the person that he claimed to have loved the most. Which is very reminiscent of, this is an aside, but I was in a thrift store the other day and I saw a coffee mug that said, "I don't care if it happens so long as it's not to me." And I was like, Jesus Christ, that's so fucked up, as like, let me have my morning coffee and also I hope bad things happen to other people. The last chapter of the book is just Winston is now free, Julia is now free. They end up seeing one another and both of them are shells of who they once were. They acknowledge when he sees her, Winston is now repulsed by the idea of having sex with her. He thinks about the memories that he thought about earlier in the book that are happy memories with him and his sister and his mother, but then convinces himself that those must be a false memory because there's too many things that don't line up with what he now knows to be the truth of the world. He sees a big photo of Big Brother, and it makes him feel really happy and safe. And as he's listening to the news about the war, he's reassuring himself that the victory that has happened is wonderful, and he is reaffirmed in his love for Big Brother.
Freedom is slavery.
And that's the book. Did you have anything that I missed that you wanted to discuss in the plot episode?
Yeah, not in the plot episode. Lots of thoughts throughout that I cannot wait to talk about in subsequent episodes, so come back. And but yeah, I think, he is, I like to note that in the last chapter he is said to be free. He's dismissed from the party. Is he in the proletariat now, or?
I think so. I think that it's implied, that you just like are released and now you have to live with the proles.
But you're free. And I think that is so powerful and also really frustrating. It's frustrating to read because you're like, what? It's over. But yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to do at the end of this episode before we fully wrap up is whenever I'm reading a book, I enjoy thinking of what I believe the people in the book look like. And that kind of leads to, if I were to make a movie based off of this, who do I think I could cast in the roles in the book that would best fit my mental image of these people? And so I was going to see if you... I can give mine first to give you some time to think, but if you had people in mind to cast for it.
I do want to note that this is a movie.
Yes.
I've never seen it, though.
It's a couple of movies.
Oh, there's more than one? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There are movies.
I think that they're making a TV show about it, possibly, as well. One of the things that I have seen, though, that irritates me whenever they've casted it is that generally they cast Winston as somebody who is attractive. And I think Winston is not supposed to be, like, movie star attractive. He's supposed to just be a middle-aged dude. So
you're about to say that whoever you cast is unattractive. Wow.
So that's what I was about to get into. Is I'm not saying that this person is unattractive, but I think that they are normal looking. Like he's the most famous normal looking guy that I can think of that is in this age range of like 40-ish, and that's Macaulay Culkin.
Okay. Interesting.
I think particularly if you gave him some makeup and some like lines in his face, I think Macaulay Culkin could really pull off a Winston in this.
Okay. did you want me to do my Winston and then are you gonna go with all yours?
Oh yeah, let's go back and forth. So who's your Winston?
Okay, I had two thoughts, but I didn't think about the attractiveness factor. Keep in mind. So my first thought was Benedict Cumberbatch.
Okay.
But don't think Doctor Strange Benedict Cumberbatch, because that feels inaccurate. But I don't know, like, while he is, like, I think a lot of people would describe him as attractive, I do feel like he just looks like a guy, you know?
I agree with that. I don't understand necessarily the Benedict Cumberbatch love. He doesn't do it for me. So yeah, I think that he just looks like a guy.
Yeah. And then another thought I had, because doesn't Winston have reddish hair?
A
little bit.
Could not tell you.
I can't remember. You know, if I look this up after we finish recording this episode and I'm wrong, let's just cut it out. We'll control the narrative, just like they do in the book. But I was also thinking, this might be crazy, Rupert Grint.
Okay. Yeah.
But maybe no beard, because I don't think Winston has a beard. And I'm not really sure where Rupert Grint is right now with his facial hair.
Yeah.
And nor do I know if he does any sort of acting anymore. I don't think so. But if he wanted to play Winston, then I think he could.
I agree with that. I think that that's a good call. My Julia that I had thought of, she's really big right now. You do not know who she is. There's no shot. But Sophie Thatcher.
Gonna look her up. Sophie Thatcher. Okay. Yeah, I definitely don't know.
Yeah, she was in the new movie. Like, I think that it's the first time that she was the lead in a movie, but she was in Companion recently. And then she was also in Maxine as, like, a side character.
Okay. I can really see this. I think she has a look in her eyes, it seems, in the pictures I'm looking at that really makes sense for Julia.
Yeah. Did you have somebody in mind for Julia?
Yeah, I was thinking Rachel Sennett.
That's a good one.
Rachel's, if you guys don't know, Rachel Sennett from Bottoms, which Samuel and I saw together in theaters when it came out, so. But not the look that she has in Bottoms, obviously. Shorter hair. Does Julia have shorter hair? I think I imagined her with shorter hair, but I think it says that. I don't know.
If it describes her as shorter hair, I do not remember, but it's entirely possible. I didn't lock in on the character's descriptions when it was given. I just kind of came up with my own.
I was thinking, I know it says dark hair. I just feel like, I don't know. I feel like at some point no woman in this world has very much like femininity. And so for some reason I tie that with shorter hair. Probably. I don't know. Like, not that shorter hair can't be feminine. It definitely can. I just,
I feel like
in
that's
this traditional sense.
Yeah. Then the last one that I was going to do was O'Brien. I think O'Brien needs to be somebody who, like, feels like they could be, like somebody who's got an imposing and powerful figure, who seems shady, but you can't really tell in what direction he's shady. So I think I would cast Tom Hardy. I feel like he's just intimidating enough, and he also has the vibes of like, oh man, this guy seems crazy. He might be about to overthrow the government, or also he might just be a militaristic dictator.
That makes sense. I feel like, it's better than what I came up with. I really tried with this one. I don't know that many older actors. But I was trying to think of someone who could be intimidating, but who could also come across as approachable at the same time. Because, you know, Winston's having this inner turmoil of like, I think this guy's on my side. Should I approach him? Should I not? He also seems really powerful. I don't know. And so I was thinking Liam Neeson.
Okay.
I don't think that's a good answer.
I see where you're coming from. I feel like he's not scary enough in my mind to be a good O'Brien, but I see what you're saying.
I mean, I just think he is... Yeah, he's not very scary. I guess it's more like his build could be, which he's a bit like burlier.
Yeah.
But he's definitely he has a kind face, so that might not work. But he's been in a lot of action movies. So,
yeah, that's true. I think that's going to do it for this episode. Make sure to tune back in next week when we are going to be talking about the historical context of both the author and the book as a whole, and kind of break into all of those kind of things that you need to know.
And we'll learn about George Orwell, the author, in that episode, which I think will be fun to learn a little bit about who is creating this story. Yeah.
But Sydney, do you want to tell people where they can find us on social media?
So one thing I want to add before I, plug our social media is that we do have an email that you can contact us at. That is thesatirefirepodcast@gmail.com. It's spelled like it sounds, but I'll spell it out. The satire SATIRE, fire FIRE, and then podcast PODCAST @gmail.com. I'm not going to spell it out every week, don't worry. But we would love to hear your thoughts on, the structure of this episode and subsequent episodes. We want to know if you're enjoying it, if you think we should change things up. Not saying we're going to listen to you, but we might, because, we're just getting started here. So I'd love to hear what you're thinking, if you enjoyed it, if you have questions. You can contact us there. And you can also find us at The Satire Fire on TikTok and on Blue Sky. And note for Blue Sky, every account has that period B Sky period social at the end, but if you just search The Satire Fire on Blue Sky, we will pop up. And on Instagram, we are at The Satire Fire Pod, POD. And we will be posting every week, hopefully multiple times a week, trying to get into a routine. And yeah, you can also DM us on any of those accounts and just interact in any way you want. You can also find this podcast on... insert where we're finding it.
You should be able to find it where all good podcasts are found.
Where all good podcasts are found, which this is a good podcast, right? Right, guys? Rate us. Leave a comment.
Yeah. Be sure to rate 5 stars, leave a comment, leave a review. We appreciate it.
Yeah. And if you have any recommendations for books you'd like us to talk about in these episodes, you can also comment, send us an email, send us a DM. We'd love to hear them. Just keep it in the satire realm, or don't, but no guarantee that we'll do the book that's not considered satire.
Yeah, I think that's it for us. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.